I mean, I'm worried now because I know exactly how I'm starting this. I knew exactly how I was going to start this panel last week, and I didn't know that James Jones-Buchanan was going to sit next to me. So I just want to ask this audience, because I want to get a feel for where we are. Does anyone know the meaning of the word frivolous? Right, at the end, John Davidson, Australian, let him in the country, journalist, podcaster, anything else you are? Steve Mascot's mate, have you got any shirts to sell?
No, never.
Made up any countries?
No.
Phil Kaplan, 4020 magazine, what else are you?
Hats. Harry's hat.
Run a bookshop. We don't even run a book, you're assistant to the runner of the bookshop.
Allowed to sit upstairs.
Jodie Boyd-Ward, international, with Wales and England and Ireland. You're like the Tony Carroll of the...
It's been a long 12 years.
Who will be playing, hopefully, in the World Cup. You're in the Wales train-up squad.
Yep,
So.
announced today, so...
That's good. Peter Smith, long-time sufferer of watching the Leeds Rhinos, and, of course, their successes with the Yorkshire Evening Post.
Hello. I'm not being rude looking at my phone, by the way, but I'm waiting to hear from Rhys Martin's appeal. They've appealed against the verdict of the last appeal, and I'm just waiting to hear the outcome. That should be any moment. So if I keep looking at my phone, that's why.
If successful, there is a rumour that Sid Hines will then be appealing his sending off in the
And James Jones-Buchanan, who's played in a World Cup, won everything. Have you got your boots ready for the weekend? Because I'm concerned about Leeds' squad.
I've started running now. That's long behind me, rugby league. Yes, it's hopefully we can get some fruits from that appeal and get our best team on the field. But we're confident. It's a far cry from where we started, isn't it? At the start of the year, turned it round. Really good environment at the minute, and I think it shows on field.
We're supposed to be talking in the first half of this programme about the current news in rugby league, which. I don't want to talk about Wakefield getting rid of a coach. I feel that's something I don't want to talk about. But, as James Jones-Buchanan sat next to me, you've been in that head coach's role, albeit as an interim in Super League. What's it like? What's the pressure like in that role? Knowing that it can only end two ways. In either you could, them getting rid of you.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to get out of it as soon as I could. Couldn't wait for Rowan to get over. You know, I was talking about this, so think about my journey as a Leeds citizen at the Rhinos. As a 9-year-old, used to stand at South Stand and watch my heroes. I used to use that phrase, educated, entertained, inspired by the role models that I saw on the pitch. They were my heroes, and I had a boyhood dream of playing for Leeds. Did that for 22 years, fulfilled that boyhood dream, retired with a massive sense of gratitude, wanted to pay that forward. And last 3 years since retiring, spent 3 years in the other side, on North Stand, being an assistant coach and an interim head coach, and probably the most revealing 3 years of my life, certainly that 6-week period before Rowan came in, was a real revelation. It was almost an awakening. And the flip side of it is that it was an absolute horrendous period in the context of where I'd been on my journey as a Leeds fan, as a Leeds player, and really wanted Leeds to do really well. So where we were at that moment, the weight of the challenge was massive, and it was like being on the side of a cliff every morning. But I loved it because it's the most alive that I'd felt as well since I finished playing. And I think when we've got a purpose in life, that's when we're at our very best. That's when we feel like we've got a role to play within the tribe. And I've not felt like I had a role to play like that for a long time. And I got up every morning at that tenure. I ran 10 kilometres, and that was my moment, first thing when sun was coming up, to get those ideas, those inspirations out, and ultimately set my day in motion. And that time you're forced really quickly to learn a lot of lessons, galvanised some really good relationship with players, and it obviously finished a lot better than it started. But we got 2.5 wins, didn't we, at back end, draw against Huddersfield, and then two pretty dire wins, but they were winning. And then Rowan's come in and he's been fantastic. 20-year career coach. I first met Rowan when I was about 14 years old, playing at Stanley. His dad was coaching at Bradford Bulls, and he come to play a few games with us, and we were all really excited. This Aussie kid was coming to play. We thought, Aussies are great, and he showed us a few tricks. Then he went off on a path as a professional career coach, and I went off as a professional player. And it's interesting we've sort of come back together this time round. But the big lesson that I learned during that 6-week interim period is, as much what I don't want to do as much as what I do want to do. And I've always been a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. Now, if you know me, you know I pop up quite in a lot of places. Often, as the poem says, is better than being a master of one. So I'm quite diverse in that I love people. You know, I'm a trustee of Leeds Rhinos Foundation, which is, I suppose, the biggest provider of our external provision in terms of going into the community with that Rhinos brand on. Doing a lot of ambassadorial work for a financial consultancy firm called Cerulo, bring a lot of work into Edinburgh. Leeds 2023, year of culture next year, really excited about that. I'm a trustee there. Managed to get Gabby Logan to come and be a chair of that, and I'm really, really excited about the role that sport can play in that as well. You know, when we left Europe with Brexit, it meant that sport could play a part in that year. And there's loads of really good events planned, and they're going to launch at Edinburgh. They're going to get involved in the Rugby League World Cup, which is great as well. I'm doing some work punditry with Sky, which was a great opportunity that presented itself this year. At the same time, another opportunity to present itself this year, which was to get my head fixed from the occupational hazard of playing Rugby League for 22 years. And I've been in what feels like an ironmonger's for the last 6 months, getting bits of metal barbed wire wrapped around my teeth, which didn't help being a pundit. But it's been a year of learning, and now I'm just about to go into another chapter in the Leeds Rhinos journey, and hopefully support rowing in years to come. I can't help but draw the parallel between what Tony Smith brought in 2004 for my generation and what Rowan Smith will bring in for the next. So I'm really excited about Leeds.
How do you feel about Willie poaching losing his job away? Because obviously you're a player with him at Leeds, won trophies with him at Leeds.
Yeah, I was coached by Willie when he retired. He went to do a bit of coaching at Rhinos with Franny Cummins. So and he's been around. He's obviously been to Warrington, been to OKR, and I've seen that he loves coaching, and he's grown and developed. And I thought, to be fair, what he did with Wakefield at the back end, they were exceptional. When they got that win against Castleford, you seen a real spirited performance, and a lot of people saying, "Oh, they won't win another game," and I'm saying, no, from what I saw there, I think they've got a couple of games in them. Certainly back end of the season when you've got that second Easter period, they're showing more than enough signs of coming together. And thankfully, they finished really strong, and I thought that might have been enough. And considering context of where he is and what he's got to work with, I thought externally done a good job. But obviously, we all make assumptions, don't we? What we don't understand, we fill with pseudo knowledge. And quite often that pseudo knowledge is a million miles off the truth. So I don't know what's going on at Wakefield or where players feel about him and Franny, but I love Willie. He's a golden bloke at heart, and I very much hope that he picks up a new role somewhere else and starts the next chapter of his life.
I mean, this is the hard thing, isn't it, Peter? For any coach who loses their job, it's all right as going on social media saying, "Oh, I hope they find a new role soon," but those roles aren't out there just to pick up straight away.
No, and especially not at this time. End of the season, everybody's already putting plans in place for next year. There won't be any vacancies yet, but there are always vacancies because clubs do things like get rid of the coach, like Wakefield have done. I didn't see it coming. Clearly, they've got somebody lined up. I think there'll be an announcement pretty soon. But I thought, without knowing the inside story, I think it's harsh on Willie and Franny. Willie was appointed last August. They won, I think, 5 of the last 7 games, and he was given the job on a full-time basis, having been a caretaker coach. And they won 5 of the last 7 games this season. So the record is the same. It was good enough to get him the job last year, and it's not good enough to keep him the job this year. I think that's strange. I don't think the problem at Wakefield is coaching. I mean, you're a Wakefield fan, aren't you? You know better than me, but they don't have any money. They don't have the resources that other clubs have. They've obviously had well-publicised problems with the stadium, which have been addressed to an extent now. They've got a lesser budget than anybody else. And I think to expect a coach to do anything other than to keep them up is a big ask, really. And he kept them up. They were 10 points off the bottom of the table, and they finished above Warrington this year. And I think, considering everything that stacked up against them, I think that was a decent effort. They won towards the end of the season. They won at Saints, admittedly a below-strength Saints team. They beat Wigan at home. They played some cracking rugby. Good to watch. I just think it's a shame.
Before we ever go to Warrington, Phil, are we going to Warrington on this tour? Are they booked us?
I think we'll be all right.
We'll be all
So
right.
feel free.
Feel free to have a go at Warrington.
Oh,
no, we'll say that for Tony Smith coming in at Hull FC, though. That's obviously something. Well, I predicted it months ago, because obviously I know everything about these things. It's easy to have 2 and 2, isn't it? But again, we talk about Wakefield's problems not being the coach. Sure, it's the same at Hull as well.
Well, Hull seem to have the same season every year. They start really well. They usually come to Headingley and win by about 30 points, not very many. And they're going to win everything. And then they get a few injuries and it all falls apart horribly over the second half of the season. I'm not sure the exact figures, but they lose something like 13 in the last 15 games, something like that. Some of the performances were absolutely appalling. And, you know, in a situation like that, the coach always carries the can. I think Tony's a good appointment for them. I think he's an outstanding coach. He won't take any mucking about. I think he'll turn things around there, but I'll be interested to see the dynamic between the people running the club and Tony. That's always something that has to be factored in when you're appointing coaches. Tony won't take any nonsense, or he won't want to be told what to do. I think that's possibly been an issue at Hull in the past.
John, you know everything, because you've got your nose to the ground. Brian McDermott's coming to Wakefield, isn't he? That's all the Fair fans want. I don't know if the Wakefield fans want it.
It's not according to Ross Evanstone, so take his word.
How have you enjoyed the 2022 season, which is still ongoing? You know, Leeds are obviously going to go on and win the grand final. We all know it's going to happen.
I think this time of year is probably the best time of year, because we're getting the semi-finals. We've got, you know, in both hemispheres, we've got grand finals coming out, and we've obviously got a World Cup. So yeah, I think it's the best time of year. It's been a long season, probably too long, but yeah, it's a really exciting time at the moment. We've seen some high quality games and hopefully some massive occasions to come. Obviously Old Trafford and then the World Cup, which, you know, it's been a long an extra 12 month play for the World Cup. So yeah, everyone's appetite should be wet.
I say, who's more tired at this part of the season, then the players or journalists?
Yeah, I would say the players. Yeah, I don't think there's any sympathy for journalists. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the injury count, obviously we saw Alex Walmsley confirmed today, and it is, players are dropping like flies, and I think I'm sure Jamie knows a lot better, but the demands that players are put on in this modern game, you know, the contact and training as well is crazy. So, you know, I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Obviously we want internationals, we want full internationals, but players need to be able to recover and recruit as well.
Not players missing the World Cup, but the best players are going to be at the World Cup. Some of them are not going to be playing for England, unfortunately. Phil, you want them to play less games. You keep saying this all the time. The problem is you want them to play less games. Do you want to play less games?
I want to do what's best for rugby league, and I think players do as well. So I think you've got to. I've seen Wigan's new facility there. There's a big sign above one of the doors that says "Disagree and then commit," and it was a phrase that stood out because that was a mantra of my old generation of players. You know, we were quite successful, not necessarily some great players, but we'd come up with an idea, didn't always agree with it, but then once we crossed that white line, we committed to make it happen, and all players want to do what's best for the game. I'm not so keen on all the whinging. I'm quite stoic, but I think, you know, there's a compounding effect of injuries. I think one thing that I've noticed from being a coach is when you get players banned, for example, then that puts more strain. Certainly Simbin during the game sent off, puts more strain on the players on the pitch, which increases the chance of injury. Then if you only get a quality training week, you've got the same players who are injured out training, which isn't very many, who are getting strained there because they've got another job to do on the weekend. And then there was a period when I think we played OKR, and I had like Jack Sinfield, 17-year-old, Morgan Gannon, I think about 18, Max Simpson, 17-year-old. You know, and only a couple of games ago they were playing for Siddle under-15s, you know, and you're asking them to go out and play against OKR and the likes of professional players, Toulouse at St Helens, like all the best, here you go. And wow, did they do a good job. And you can do that with young kids, you know, you can make it a big enough occasion for them to run the blood to water. You're never going to score many points, but they'll work hard, and it's a big baptism of fire for them. But yeah, I think we should play less games and make it a higher quality spectacle with our better, more athletic players.
Now, if you play less games, I'm going to take on the role of club administrator.
Yeah.
You're playing less games, going to pay you less money. You're happy with that?
Yeah.
Are all your teammates happy with that, or is it just you? Are you the outlier in this?
I think if the money will go up when people become more interested in it, and people become more interested long term when the game gets better. You know, if they want to watch Yorkshire League because we want to bash a load of games, and then that's fine. And look, as a player again, I'm not bothered because it's the same for everybody. As long as we're all playing by the same rules, I used to quite enjoy the endurance element to it. You know, a lot of my old teammates are pretty sadistic. They like to watch what Kev does, those running ultramarathons day after day. We quite enjoyed the endurance side of it. And then what you do, you drag other teams into it and say, come on, are we having this or what? Let's compete. But as a spectacle, I think it needs to be as athletic and powerful. And that's what you see in the NRL, and it looks like you've got 13 against 13 athletes, and it's outstanding. But again, I understand the alternative argument as well.
I need to see how long we can do without Phil speaking. This is the plan now. We've gone 15 minutes. Jodie, you're next. You're part of this massively successful Leeds club, which is annoying to everyone outside of Leeds because the Rhinos men, they're in grand finals, Challenge Cup finals, they win stuff all the time. The women have been in a grand final every year they've existed. They're in it again on Sunday. The PDRL team won the grand final this weekend, won't tell you who they won it against. And now the Leeds Rhinos, they won the Wheelchair Challenge Cup this year, won the League Leaders Shield, you've got the playoffs this weekend against the London Roosters. What is so special about the Leeds club?
I think where we started like 10 years ago, we were the team that were getting beaten week in, week out. You know, people laughed at us and didn't take us seriously because we were there to have fun. And with that, you know, we developed our skills. We got a coach on board who was willing to put in the time and the effort to actually develop us as people and players. And gradually we started to win. I think our first win, I've never seen a team celebrate as much as what we did. I do remember the hangover the next day. But we've just been working as a unit and we've become so cohesive. And I'm pretty sure, you know, if any of the others from Leeds are here that say the same, that we almost know what we're going to do before we do it. We don't, everyone says, you know, you're such a structured team, we can tell when you're about to run a play. I'm glad somebody can, because we don't. Like, we just hope for the best. But no, it's a lot of hard work, and last year, you know, history-making treble that we won for the first time. And this year, we've had people injured, people out ill, work commitments, World Cup commitments, and we've made the best of what we can. And I think as a team, to go on and get to where we are, which is the semi-finals on Saturday, we're just going out there to give it all. Like, for us, yes, the World Cup starts for us, you know, the next month, but we've got to get the Leeds wins out the way and aim for the third trophy this season. And again, if we get it, amazing. That's, you know, trebles 2 years on the bounce. But if we don't, we can say we gave it everything. And you know, we're just working. I'm pretty sure Simo is sick of us at this point because see, Jonesy knows what I'm on about. Our captain likes to look at other sports and bring things in from other sports. And I say captain, he's also our coach. And every time he brings something in, it's usually either myself or my teammate Nathan Collins who pipes up with some question about why we're doing it. What's the point in this? Like, how have you got this from tennis? So yeah, it's definitely a big one. And, you know, we said last year before we knew about the World Cup being postponed that our goal, you know, as a team, you've got myself and 4 of the team who are, I think it's 4, I lose count, who are hoping to play for England at the World Cup. And we said, you know, at the end of the day, international, when it gets to it, you know, we're no longer teammates. But whilst we're in our domestic season, it's Leeds first and foremost, and we go out there and put everything on and leave everything on the pitch.
Remind me, which of your Leeds teammates did you bash when you were playing for Wales against England in Sheffield last year?
Halliwell. In fact, there's a clip of me tackling my Leeds teammate, pushing him over, laughing in his face, then spinning back around, going up to him, going, "But are you okay?" He's not let me forget that, and I have said to him that if we face each other in the semi-finals, there's no such thing as Leeds.
We'll talk more about the World Cup in the second half of the programme. Phil, I'm going to bring you in now. You've had 20 minutes of not saying anything.
It's been lovely. I've enjoyed it. So has everybody else.
I get the feeling, and I don't win Leeds, so I'm not playing to the gallery, honest. But when Leeds Rhinos tweet #OneClub, I get the feeling that that's not just a meaningless hashtag. I'm not saying that one team's more important than the other, but everyone's given the same opportunity in the club, and that's why all 4 teams I've mentioned so far have been successful in their own ways.
I mean, I have to obviously have a hand up with vested interest here, but I think a lot of that does come down to the foundation, of which I'm honoured to be chair at the moment. And I think that bringing PDRL, LDRL and now wheelchair under the foundation, liverying up all the teams to look the same, they can all wear that blue and amber badge and feel genuine equality. And we'll mention that when we talk about the World Cup. The big thing about the World Cup this year is that men, women and wheelchair and PDRL and now an LDRL tournament that's going to run alongside it, they will all have the same spotlight, the same billing. Now that's pretty unique to Rugby League, and there's a lot of things that might need to change in the foreseeable future about Rugby League, but our inclusive nature is our USP. And I think if you're looking at why, I mean, you and I have been big fans and proponents of the women's game and the wheelchair game when it was in its infancy. I've seen a lot of Jodie playing. Don't argue with it. Even actually, if you've got
She helped me make a tackle. I was right.
Do not disagree with her. She is fierce. But there is this togetherness about all of these teams, and I think it does stem from the fact that whilst it would be great to get more resource into the wheelchair game, it would be lovely if Leeds had a sports hall they could play out that they could call their own and brand up. It'd be great if the women's team could be paid at least their expenses or for turning up to play, and hopefully we might be getting to that. But at the moment they've got access to strength and conditioning, they've got access to a gymnasium, they've got access to, even Rowan Smith presenting the women with their shirts before they went out last week. All of that I think is a cultural thing. Now I think Jamie will tell you, culture's massive, but it's really hard to define. Some teams have it and some teams don't, and if you say what's the missing ingredient, it's not in a book somewhere. It might be about just how people get on with each other and buy into a concept. And I think that does tend to happen at Leeds. And I think it's happened when they became the Rhinos. What people forget is that first year of Super League in 1996, Leeds were woeful, absolutely abject. But for the fact there were 2 worst teams in the division who weren't ready to play Super League in Workington and Oldham, Leeds were shocking. And Gary Hetherington will tell you that he knew he was taking over towards that last game and walked round the stadium. I think Leeds were playing Workington at home, and there were about 5,000 people in the ground. So they've come from a base where they know what it takes to relate to the community, and that is inherent in how they treat all the teams. I know we'll talk about other things that are going to affect the game at the moment, and you almost hinted at it with, are we playing too many games? But the next 3 months are really crucial for this sport, because you're going to get IMG reporting on the 28th of September. So we're going to get an idea of how they view the game. They've been brought in as consultants, and the word is that because there was unanimous agreement to bring them in, there's not going to be too much disagreement about what they propose. I don't know how radical it's going to be, nobody does until they announce it, but that's a blueprint for the future. That's pretty important. That's going to lead into a World Cup, and again it's a World Cup on home soil. It's 61 games all on the BBC. You'll be able to listen to Jones tell you about exactly what's happening, senior pundit, but it's going to give us a platform, and if we don't take advantage of this, then we never will.
what's that phrase you? Is it we never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity? Like York's men playing at the same time as York's women.
Professor Tony Collins is finest for us.
John Davidson, you've been reporting for months that there's going to be a change of leadership of this sport. Who's going to take over? What's going to happen? Now Brown's disappearing off into the...
I don't know who's going to take over. There's obviously a lot of talk that it's going to be an internal person at the RFL, maybe
so if it is an internal appointment then, as the last one was, does that mean any difference whatsoever to the game going forward?
I think it does, because the interesting thing is that the RFL won't be what it is at the moment. Obviously, Rugby League Commercial has been created, which is another body just to confuse people, and it will run commercial matters, and they are looking for a managing director. And I think Ralph Rimmer hinted that last week there could be a body called Rugby League Gov or Government. So just to be more confusing, I guess you could frame it would be a lesser role. But as Phil said, I mean, it really depends what IMG suggests and also what the clubs are willing to embrace, because IMG doesn't have powers to enforce change. It's doing a review. It will make suggestions, but obviously, as Phil's magazine, I think a few months ago wrote, there was a similar review in the 70s, which a lot of recommendations weren't taken through, and then in the 90s, obviously, with Maurice Lindsay, a lot of those recommendations, the frame of the future, weren't introduced either. So it's really a case of wait and see. I think what will happen in the future.
Must be hidden in one of these books about this life, right? Some old dusty report on how rugby league is going to grow in the future. How do you see things changing, Peter? Because obviously, as John's mentioned, we've had this time and time again, but is this, on the back of the World Cup, the great opportunity for rugby?
Well, it's a great opportunity, but as you say, bitter experience tells us all that, you know, we'll believe real change when we see it, because we've been, as you say, we've been here before and been in this situation and nothing's really changed. I think that the way the game is at the moment, clearly things need to be done to get the game, I don't know if back on its feet is the right word, but to get the game thriving, just for people to feel better about the sport, because it's supposed to be entertainment. We watch rugby league because we like it, and you know, we're thrilled by it and we enjoy it, but an awful lot of people, supporters of the game, don't actually seem to like the game very much at the moment, and I think that's a concern.
Oh, I've got to go to rugby again.
You only have to look. You only have to look at. I mean, I don't know if anybody reads the letters page of League Express.
Rich is the only one.
These are supposed to be people. These are rugby league fans, and every single letter is basically saying, "I hate rugby league." And you know, we just need to.
But isn't that
someone like Jonesy would be perfect. We just need to get
see the
people
world
enjoying
as it is.
Just need to get people enjoying the sport again and looking at it in a more positive light. Whether that'll happen or not, I don't know. I think there are some big changes needed. I don't think just appointing somebody that's already at the RFL is the answer. I think we need to make proper change. John Dutton, the World Cup's not happened yet, obviously, but seems to be doing an outstanding job as the head of that. I think he'd be a good choice to take the game forward.
Okay, David, you don't want to be a coach, but now we've put you forward. You're the chief executive of the Rugby Football League. What are you going to do?
Just try and get everybody together. There's a word up there that says the power together. It's a bit of branding for World Cup, and you can either pay lip service to it or you can live it. We see it again and again, you know. And I'm not boasting, I'm just, impressing upon you the magnitude of experience that I've had with 8 grand final rings under my bed and a handful of other medals, World Cup challenges, and it wasn't a case of loads of magic and great players. We just did everything together and bought in and saw the bright side of most things. I still love rugby league. It's a hard game. It was born out of a little bit of hardship, I think, and that's part of our identity. But I'd be interested to know, what does rugby league, a good version of rugby league, look like? If we start there, what's the vision? What does it look like? Ingrain that into our subconscious and then just go and make it happen. That's how life works. You've got to come up with a vision. You've got to have some leadership. You mentioned Maurice Lindsay there. He had a vision and an idea, everybody hated it at the time, from the historical footage that I've seen and read. And even when he passed away, you know, the Sky did a fair bit of coverage on him. And people walking around with placards, banging on about summer rugby league. Oh, this is ridiculous, how glorious rugby league is old. And actually now, people like myself wouldn't have had the journey that I've had in the modern era, you know, earned the wages I've earned. I'm not a footballer, but I'm not bad either. And I'm well looked after. I've had great opportunities to continue at a fantastic club. And again, that's where all my gratitude comes from. And getting up every morning is based on paying it forward. You know, using all my time and energy to try and promote the game for the positive and see it good. I'm really interested. Somebody's going to talk to me here today. What does a good rugby league look like? What does it look like? When rugby league's great, right, if we was like punching the air and proud about it. If it's not now, what does it look like?
Does it include the match review panel? Is that everyone fans of the match review panel?
Speaking of which,
breaking news.
Leeds Rhinos Rhys Martin has been unsuccessful in his attempt to overturn last week's disciplinary tribunal ruling that his appeal against the one-match suspension, blah, blah, blah. He is suspended for the semi-final.
He's now been banned until 2026.
Need him last week.
Can I ask Jeremy a question on the back of
Do
what
whatever
you
you want.
said?
Yeah.
Ingrained in the DNA of northern industrial working class people.
Yes.
Optimism wouldn't be one of those things. So, who comes up with the model of what it looks like? Because does it need some kind of benevolent despotism? Are we too democratic that we want everybody to tell us what it should look like? Do we just need somebody to say, this is what it looks like, this is what's going to happen, you buy in or you don't?
Well, that's leadership, isn't it? And you need to be brave. That's what stood out about Morris for me, regardless of people that said, no, I don't like this. And a fair few people said, no, we were doing it anyway. And that's brave. You know, the amount of times I've seen U-turns in rugby league, that's catastrophic. That's not great leadership. And listen, I'm all for going down the dark alley sometimes to see what's at the other end of it. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll get what you always got. That's what we are doing, isn't it? So somebody's got to pick up the baton, have an idea. I've done a few tournaments down in with PDC darts through Eddie Earn. I've just been for Eddie's at Earn's book. Barry Earns, and I get invited to this charity fishing match every year, and I'm privileged to be able to sit down and talk to them and what they've done with darts, what they've done with snooker, done with boxing, what they've done with certain aspects of golf. I think they even have like a 10-pin bowling competition.
They do.
It's ridiculous. Everything they touch turns to gold, but they've got to own it because they understand what entertainment and events looks like. You know, when you're filling out Wembley for big contests and cross-pollinating YouTubers with fighters, you know, my kids are like, Dad, I want to go watch KSI fight, and I'll do it, because that's what their generation want to see. And I remember having a conversation with him saying, I've tried to get hold of Challenge Cup, I've tried to come in and say I'll do something with Challenge Cup, but nobody will give me it. And I can understand why. It's a really prestigious, important tournament, but if we're that objective, that upset about the way the game is going, why not give it to somebody who's tried and tested? The other thing as well is, right, when everybody keeps saying we need somebody to come into rugby league and take it over and lead it, and I've seen Richard Branson, 1999, London Broncos, right? You had Marwan Kukash, Robert Elston, all these other people that have done pretty well in other sports have come in and almost like Old Testament prophets, just being smashed to bits by a game. David Argyle at Toronto, smashed to bits and then just thrown out of it. And then where's the next one? Come in, try and do something, and we'll smash you to bits as well. Maybe we need to let somebody have a go and just go down a bit of a track and see where it takes us.
Too much self-interest. It's not
exactly self-preservation. Yeah.
That's why the Hearns are never going to work, because they would say we're doing it this way, and the clubs would say no, you're not.
But now's a very good time to do it because the clubs have never been economically weaker, and that goes back to the very first question about why Wakefield have changed their coach. It's an economic argument. It's nothing to do with the ability of Willie Poaching and Francis Cummins, who have done an incredible job to take them to where they are. It's to do with the fact that they're going to replace them with their assistant, and there's a huge cost saving, and they've got rid of a lot of the high-earning players for next year, but they're still going to be a Super League team, and you're saying, right, well, what are the criteria to be a Super League team? If you're going to have, let's say, 3/4, 2/3 of the budget of everybody else, because that's what you've restricted yourself by, how can you get the best competition? And it does need somebody like the Hearns to come and say, it's a minimum standard. If you don't come up to it, you can't be in it.
You're depressing me.
We're not going to Wakefield either.
No, well, not after last. I think there were only about 3 people watching in Wakefield. Should merge all the 3 clubs, just put them all together in one day. What do we do then?
If
John?
they'd done that,
where would we be now? Yeah.
What are they going to call it? Colder, horrible.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a strong club playing in front of regular 5-figure gates in a decent stadium, winning things.
We can say this because we're in Leeds, but I would, and I've said this on the programme, they should merge the 3 women's teams because they're a waste of time at the minute. Wakefield, Featherstone and Castleford women's teams are all separate. There's no point in having 2 teams that are battered every week and one that's at the top end of the 2nd division. It's pointless. Especially when you can, in the women's game, in the wheelchair game, where you don't have that history, where you can change things and try something different.
You mentioned Castleford there. What's happened to Castleford's women's team is typical rugby league, though, isn't it? That 3 or 4 years ago, they were setting the standard in women's rugby league. They had a superb team, but apparently they weren't looked after. The club didn't take advantage of this. They had 1,500 people turning up to home matches, but nobody took them under the wing. And the women, the coaching staff and the players got fed up, and now they've all moved to York. They were playing Leeds in the grand final on Sunday. It's just, that was another example of an opportunity missed. Castleford could have really made something of that, and they didn't. And the game needs people who can get a grip of these opportunities, I think.
But the interesting thing, having said that, and it relates to Jodie, you're playing London Roosters in the semi-final on Saturday. London Roosters is not the traditional route that people go down. That was Martin Cloyd looking at what he wanted out of wheelchair rugby league and saying, we've got some very good players in the south of England, but we probably haven't got enough to sustain 3 or 4 teams. Let's make a super team. And they're in the semi-finals. Does it work for you, having London Roosters in the league?
Yeah, I think for us we haven't really noticed a massive difference other than, like with us at Leeds we've got 8 key players kind of thing. Roosters are saying they tend to have a set amount of players, but rather than it being, 3 or 4 different teams in different leagues, it has made them, I want to say it's made them stronger this year. And, it's been it's been a learning curve, I think, not only for us to play against this new super team, but also for Roosters, because, some of them are from the previous team, which was the Argonauts and Medway Dragons, and they've all had to combine, and, I think Martin had the right idea with it, and, it's leading to development, and it's one of, a few clubs that have formed a super team, and I think he's got the right idea. It's going in the right direction.
Which we have mergers, John. I mean, you can say this because you've got no iron in the fire. I can't say Wakefield should merge.
As long as no one merges with North Sydney, it's fine. Just jumping back to what Phil was saying before, what Jay was saying. I mean, you can look at sort of the dictator, benevolent dictator, but I mean, if you look at what's happened with Peter V'landys at the moment, he was hailed as the Messiah, and now there's not really a lot of love for him. Obviously, he brought in the 6 again, which has proved to be a flop. He took a TV deal, which the AFL's got a lot more. So I think that in any system, there are pluses and minuses against a sort of despot. But in terms of mergers, I mean, yeah, you make a good point. If that had been forced through, West Tigers perhaps aren't the best example, but they have won a competition. And while their fans aren't very happy, they do have a strong fan base. St George Illawarra, are a very strong club. I think it's a difficult one because tribalism is inherent in the spirit of rugby league. That's what probably drives it, but then it's also probably a weakness in some ways. So you can look at Sheffield and Huddersfield as an example.
Huddersfield,
yeah.
Gateshall, they were good.
Yeah, didn't work so well. So yeah, there's no golden ticket.
No, it's nearly half time. So I'm not going to come up with any more ridiculous questions like who's going to win the grand final. I think it's June. So we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the World Cup, which we're all excited about. In the meantime, while you have a break, don't plan on going to where are the RFL based now? Is it Manchester?
The Etihad.
Go and protest like myself and I think 4 other Wakefield fans did in 2000 to try and get our points deduction reduced. Although it was reduced, but I don't think it was because we stood outside Red Hall. I don't think that was the case. So we'll come back, we'll talk about the World Cup and more and enjoy the biscuits, which are there, provided by, is it the World Cup or the Council? I'm showing the lack of leadership. Obviously, Jim Buchanan full of leadership. The wheel tappers and shunters. Give them a nudge. Give them a nudge.
Atlantic. They're having mothers meeting.
I know, it's shocking. Oh, they,
See?
what were you talking to us? Yeah. You're getting all the gossip there. The World Cup is coming. It starts in how many days? Do we know? Less than 50. Less than 50. We're going all around the Northern Powerhouse, aren't we, Phil? Apparently.
If only it existed.
Don't say that. Don't kick us off this tour. It hasn't even started yet. The World Cup is coming. We're all excited. We were supposed to be here last year. Jim, you played in the World Cup. What's it like to go out there, wear this shirt of your country, sing the anthem, do all that? What's it like?
2008 wasn't a great example, to be fair. It was the old Leeds and Saints World Cup, wasn't it? But look, when you get an opportunity to represent your country, it's the best thing you can possibly do. I think I remember doing an interview, and certainly with the St George's flag in that old white kit, felt like a Knights Templar. I'm a bit of a medieval romanticist anyway. So when I'm running out there, it wasn't very often. I played maybe 10 games. But one of the biggest sort of most gratifying moments of my career was playing against Aussies at Wembley, and playing with likes of Billy Slater and Greg Inglis and Cameron Smith, and I played them a couple of times when they'd come over with Melbourne Storm at World Cup Challenge, but representing your country is phenomenal. And Steve McNamara did a wonderful job. We used to go down to Loughborough at end of season, and we'd have a camp there, and I think that's when you really get to understand and respect a lot of the other players in the Super League. Certainly, I'll give you one example of Sean O'Loughlin. I don't think he realised how good he is or was until you played with him, and what a lovely kid he was as well, even for a Wiganer. You know, so I really enjoyed that part. One of the most gratifying parts of my career for sure, and a big honour, as it always is, to represent the country.
Right, so we won't talk about the World Cup in 2000. We're definitely not going to talk about the World Cup in 2030. I mean, it's all just heartbreak for England, Phil. Although, I mean, here is the good historical precedent, of course. 1954, new monarch on the throne, great Britain in the World Cup. So, 2021/2 World Cup, we're going to win. And we've got 4 chances to win one. So, you know, it's a good opportunity.
We're going to win the wheelchair World Cup.
You're saying that with Jodie said next year?
We?
England. I'll let you get to the semis.
I mean, fairness, you did play for it, so you can, you know.
Yeah, but we lost that World Cup.
We might win the PDRL.
Yeah.
Which would be great. Captained by a Leeds lad, Scott Gogan. I'd have to say, and John will give you an insight onto the teams that are going to be coming over from the Southern Hemisphere, that the women's NRL, which I've seen a little bit of this year, is just at such an elevated level at the moment in terms of just how, it's not just a skill level. I mean, you almost take that as a given, but the physicality of that competition is above what we've been seeing here at the moment. And even though we're at home, and I'm really excited about the double-header kick-off at Headingley. I think, you know, England playing Brazil is something we should be celebrating. Jamaica being in a men's World Cup is something we should be celebrating. But I think if we're really honest, I'd be amazed if the England women's team are at a level that the Gillaroos and the Kiwis are at the moment. So I think you have to be realistic about that. The men, I don't know what we're expecting. John watches a lot more NRL than I do. I think we'll underestimate the Australians, even though they'll still be favourites.
Fourth in the world, still, they're rubbish now.
They'll have some unfamiliar names and they'll be brilliant. I think the Kiwis have already shown that they shouldn't be underestimated. We saw how good Tonga were in the last World Cup. The opening game against Samoa, if they can pick everybody that they've got available, that'll be a test in itself. But it's what we want. You know, if we're serious about putting International Rugby League at the peak of the game, and whatever IMG tell us about the domestic game, there has to be a way of putting internationals and coming up with a schedule whereby they take precedence and players, as many of the top players are as fit to play in those games. That's going to get us more cut through than Wigan playing Castleford 12 times in the season. And that's always been the case, we just haven't done it. So where are we? Probably with the withdrawal of Alex Walmsley today puts us a little bit further back, so I'll take 2 out of 4.
It's not bad, is it? At least we've increased our chances by having more World Cups as part of this World Cup, thanks to the inclusive nature of Rugby League. Go on then, John. Who's going to win it, apart from Australia?
I think one of the Pacific nations are a huge chance as well as New Zealand. If you look at what's happened since 2017, and I think that World Cup was a good marker. I remember John Key, he was still coaching Wales, but he pointed out, I think it was an interview with the BBC, about the disparity that had been brought in, because obviously Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Tonga, I mean, all their players, if they're not playing in the NRL, they're playing in the Queensland Cup or the New South Wales Cup, obviously with PNG numbers. And just being exposed to those training, that level, the speed of the game, that level every week, just puts them at a higher level, essentially. And what Christian Wolf's done with Tonga, I think, is remarkable. I was there in 2019 when they beat Australia, which was a historic moment. They'd beaten Great Britain in Hamilton the week before, which was equally a historic moment. And then obviously PNG went on to beat Great Britain. So I think that there is a shifting of power, and you could say it is away from Australia, because one of the good things is now we have a number of state origin players who are Australian, they're born and raised in Australia, but they have Samoan parents or Tongan parents, and they're very close to their heritage, and they're electing to play for those nations. And Australia has the player depth that, I mean, we will see, but you could say arguably it won't affect them that much, because James Tedesco can play and Tommy Turbo can go and play for Serbia or wherever. But that's the really interesting thing. And I think obviously New Zealand won the World Cup in 2008, but imagine what a Samoa or a Tonga winning a World Cup would do. I mean, it would be huge.
I mean, we talk about these things, though, about what the impact would be if England won the World Cup and the game domestically. But in terms of in Australia, the fact that they're not far ahead now as the world number one, the fact that there are been competitive matches against Samoa, Tonga, etc., is that improving things for international rugby league in Australia? Because obviously, it's a big joke. The Australians don't care. It's only about New South Wales and Queensland.
Well, I think there's a real chasm developing now. And I was actually speaking to a former international today, and he was suggesting that even if Australia lost the World Cup final, there wouldn't be that much change. And he's probably right. I mean, there are a lot of insular people in Australia because it's so far away. But also, if you look at the rep weekend that we had, I think it was June, July, sold out crowd at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland, huge crowds for Fiji and Papua New Guinea and the Cook Islands. And the fans, the atmosphere, people were really buying into that. So I think there is a lot of people in Australia who want international rugby league to grow. They want to see it. There's obviously a lot of people in clubland and even in the media who don't. They want to keep the NRL as the premium product and state of origin. But there's a rift there. And I think the way to help things along is have a great World Cup, have fantastic games, great atmospheres, big crowds, and then you can literally say, okay, this is something we can sell. We have to buy it, we can't ignore this any longer. And I think that's the way things are going because of the likes of Tonga and other things like that. Because you've got some of the best players in the world, Brian To'o, Jerome Luai, electing to play for Samoa instead of Australia is a big wake-up call to a lot of people.
We're going into a World Cup, Peter, where obviously England aren't going to be at their strongest. We know that because of injuries. Does it matter for the tournament to be a success or not that England aren't in the final with a chance of winning the tournament?
I think the tournament will be a success because I think it's been really well run in the build-up. It's been well marketed. It's got some good people looking after it. It would help if England get to the final, and particularly if they win it. But I think Old Trafford will sell out for the final anyway, and that's going to be great. It did in 2017. England didn't get that year after. Even by England's standards, a heartbreaking defeat in the semi-final to New Zealand. It would help, but I think the tournament will be a success. And I think the fact that we're not saying 100% of Australia are going to win it is a real selling point. I think Australia probably will, because they always do. but not 100% sure of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's not an Australia-New Zealand final. Wouldn't be surprised if one of the Pacific nations gets to the final. I think there's a little bit more uncertainty about this tournament, and I think that's great. I think, as I say, the way it's been marketed is very good. I think they've chosen the right sort of venues for the right sort of matches. I think the women's tournament's going to be terrific, as Phil says. I think I watch a lot of the women's game over here, and I think it's going to be quite an eye-opener when we see the Kiwis and the Aussies. But the organisers are hoping for a record crown for the double-headed opener at Headingley. That'll be a fantastic occasion. The wheelchair's going to be terrific. I mean, wheelchair rugby league is just such a good sport to watch, and it really works on telly as well. I think that is probably the thing that's really going to make the impact this year is the wheelchair tournament. No, I'm expecting good things. I think it's going to be a really good tournament. Hopefully, normally a series of disasters before a Rugby League World Cup. I don't know if anyone remembers 2000 when just like, there was an apocalyptic rain for sort of the entire tournament. I was in Ireland for one of the games and we couldn't get out. The whole place, the whole country was underwater. I think it will be a lot better than that. Hopefully the weather stays fair, and I think people will turn up. I think people are going to enjoy it.
I'm fairly sure that St James's Park was much better on the telly than John Inverdale stood in front of wherever it was. It in Belfast, that first game?
The first game was...
Because Willie Bodger was kicking for some... I thought, I'd never seen Willie Bodger kick before. Dear. So, obviously, the wheelchair game is the one where England are going to... apologies, Jodie, but...
That's all right.
Obviously, it's going to be an England-Wales final. I mean, not put any pressure on, but, you know, obviously, after it's York to do nothing this season in Women's Rugby League, and they won the league this year, so... Shows you what I know about the game. But... we were talking earlier about how you promote things, giving it to Eddie Hearn or whatever. The thing that struck me about the grand final last year was when you came out onto the pitch with the lights off and you've all got spotlights on you. It's an event. It's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, go back even as short as 3 or 4 years ago, we're in the grubbiest sports halls that you can imagine, with somebody trying to stream on YouTube and keep the Wi-Fi going. So even in just that short period of time, to have the likes of BBC and Sky Sports actually broadcasting the games that we've got, and to making such an event out of it. And as Pete says, it translates really well on TV as well. Now, don't get me wrong, in person you definitely hear the hits of the shares, but if it's one of those games that anybody's going to go, oh, I want, what's this? I think it is going to be the wheelchair game, and I think with the World Cup as well, having the splitting group games and having, England's group based at the Copper Box in London and my group based at Sheffield, to then come and meet in the semis at Sheffield, it just means that there's a chance to draw bigger crowds, get people who perhaps have gone, not kind of my sport, not really bothered about it, and go, wow, we have people turn up to our home games at Leeds Beckett who I've just found out via either Foundation or Rhinos tweeting it, promoting it on social media and going, didn't know what to expect. And I think it's that surprise element in one way that is really going to help keep the momentum going within, not just wheelchair, but rugby league as a whole.
Phil, people say that, we've had the Women's Challenge Cup final as part of the semi-final day. I mean, we were there for the great standalone final in 2018 when a huge crowd was at Warrington. And you fell out with someone from the archive. It was hilarious.
He did, it was hilarious.
It was. Double headers for the women's games in the World Cup. Some say we're disrespecting the women by having double headers, not having single games here, there and everywhere.
I think the final at Old Trafford will be sensational. Partly because you've got the women's game as the part of the double header with the men's game, and it may well be that both of those matches involve teams outside of the nations that we would predominantly support. But already you're talking about an occasion, And going back to what Jamie was saying about the Hearns, what we're saying about what Rugby League needs to look like, it needs to be event-based. You need to give people a reason to want to go to something, because irrespective of who wins, you want to be part of it. And I think the opportunity to see, I believe Australia and New Zealand can't meet in the men's final, they can only meet in the semi-final. So if it was something like Tonga and Australia, why wouldn't you want to be there to see that? But if your women's final, let's say, could be Australia and New Zealand, and you're watching all of these players you've seen on telly actually live in front of you, that is the way to promote it. To have, double-header games of wheelchair, fantastic. You're just getting into it, you're really enjoying it, you're getting to understand it. And the one thing I would say about the wheelchair game is, if you go, it will only take you 5 minutes to forget people in wheelchairs, which might seem like a stupid thing to say, but it's rugby league. You're starting to count the tackles, you're looking at the tactics, you're wondering who's going to chip over and when the speedy guy, which is normally Nathan Collins, is going to come round on a loop. But it's rugby league. And again, without being here to just promote wheelchair rugby league, it is actually non-stop. It's the only variant of rugby league that plays for the full 80 minutes. You can't have a trainer on and just say, I've had a head knock here, can I have 10 minutes to put it on? They do not stop. They are astonishing athletes. But I think if you get the chance to go to the Copper Box and see 2 games, fantastic. It is the way ahead. And yes, at some point they will be big enough to have their own self-promotion. But now, one of the great things about this World Cup, which I would urge everyone to get tickets for, is if you get the chance to see 2 games for the price of 1, take it.
And the post might fall over, which is always fun.
Well, hold on, playing.
We're not going to Hull, are we?
We're not going to.
No, we're
Well, we might go to.
We might be
crossing it off
the
the
man
list.
was in now.
Oh, no. So we don't want to talk about you playing the World Cup. We discussed 2008. But what are you looking forward to most about this tournament coming up?
Well, no apologies for going on about it again. The highlight of my year in 2022 was the mid-season international wheelchair game, England-France. We covered that for Sky. And some of the stories, like Seb Bashari, the kid who plays for Catalans, brutal enforcer for England. And Tom Halliwell as well, captain, obviously played at Leeds, broke his leg, I believe, playing amateur game against Mikolaj Alensky, decided, right, my leg's broke, but I want to carry on playing, I've got to play with my mate's wheelchair, and the rest is history. And I don't know if anybody here has been to a wheelchair game yet, but it's unbelievable, it's brilliant, and anybody can have a go at it as well. So James Simpson took me in, and he got me kicking goals, driving around, racing. I remember the first time I didn't grasp that you've got to put the ball on your knee to carry it and try and trap it in there and use 2 hands. I've got it under the wing, I'm going down in circles. What's going on here? I couldn't go anywhere. But it's a great game to play, a great game to watch. As Phil's saying, it's really quick, and it's absolutely got the collision and physicality as well. Seb Blue just smashed people a bit, battered the French, didn't he? Then I think he played with them week after it for Catalans. But I'm really excited about that, and if you haven't had a chance to go see it yet, go see it. I think the best thing about double headers is it gets you over the line. So I went with the women in 2019, Papua New Guinea, and I've seen the journey that they've been on, and how the women's game's progressed since then. And all you have to do is look at a grand final, the images of them lifting the trophy in 2018, 2019, 2020, you can see the progression getting bigger and better. Those girls are getting more professional. They've never been any less committed than the men, absolutely. They've made the most of what resources they've got. And they're changing hearts and minds. So when I went to P&G, the Power Mary, they really were going to schools and changing hearts and minds of a country that's still pretty medieval in terms of the way that they look at women, in regards to life in general, never mind playing sport. And it's great, it's inspiring to see, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that. The game at Mount Smart, the semi-final at Tonga, I was there. It was the best game I've ever watched, I reckon, as a spectator. If that had happened in England, them dying moments, fans would have pulled seats up, set cars on fire, but all the Tongans were just singing prayers and singing. I'm like, this is amazing, nearly in tears. And I'm really pleased that Tom Lolo and Fafita and those other guys committed to their heritage, but it'll only encourage more to do the same. If you've got a real strong All Nations sort of competition down in Australia, and then we have got a strong All Nations competition here, and I know it wouldn't be yet, but with consistency over time. I'd like to think the French who are looking forward to World Cup 2025, you know, Toulouse, Catalan's not Toulouse going down, which is a shame. But bring Ireland into it. Lads like Richie Myler, James Bentley are really proud and excited about playing for them. And, you know, throw for the Scottish in there, if you have to put Lachlan Coote for a bit until we get some Scots throwing logs around and wanting to play Rugby League as well, that's great. But let's have some sort of consistency, and every now and again, merge the two, have a big hellfire of a competition, and yeah, promote world sport. I think the most important thing is we're guilty sometimes being really purist about Rugby League. So when Aussie said they weren't going to bring the best players over in 2021, everybody was like, oh, we can't have a World Cup without the best players. But the vast majority of people who will watch the World Cup will only see Australia. Don't have a clue who the best players are. Right, I remember watching a women's soccer competition, and it was something like Germany against USA. Now, I don't know anything about women's soccer. I know a fair bit about men's soccer, and I know Germany, a hell of a good team. And Germany had smashed USA all day long in the men's game. But apparently in the women's game, USA are the best. Right, but I didn't know that. All I saw was Germany playing USA. Now, if I'd watched it, I'd have been as a fan of sport, and I'd go, oh, this is interesting. Now, people who watch Rugby League, hopefully, because we want people who don't normally watch it, will just see Ireland against France or Ireland against Jamaica. You know, they're not going to have much of an insight or any sort of bias as to what they've seen before. And as long as the games are competitive and cultural, and we're shining those kits, flying the flags and filling the stadiums, I think it'd be really entertaining.
Because as ridiculous as it sounds, John, the event-going public who are going to be buying tickets to England versus Greece at Bramall Lane, the home of football, of course, of Sheffield United, best team in Yorkshire, they don't know that Greece are going to probably lose by 100 points to them. He says, putting the pressure on Sean Wayne, I hope he's not watching.
Well, an American friend of mine who lives in Sheffield, he's got a ticket to that game. I don't think he's ever seen a rugby league game before. But, you know, it's in Sheffield, it's an event, and obviously it's been marketed to people who aren't rugby league fans. And that's a good example. But just on what Jamie said, I mean, I've been lucky to be at FIFA World Cups, Rugby Union World Cups at Twickenham, Ashes Test. That game at Bounce Stadium in 27 is the best atmosphere I've ever seen of any sporting event. And I think if we can find a way to sort of fly over 50,000 Tongans from Auckland or Brisbane, that would be great. But no, but seriously, I mean, if we can kind of generate those kind of atmospheres, it doesn't really matter who's playing. If it's a contest and the atmosphere is there, you want to be a part of it. And I think anyone who was there, who saw it on TV, saw something amazing. But to be there was something special.
And I think that's the other thing about World Cups that we shouldn't underestimate. One is the cultural side that goes along with it. So you want to be seeing a Sippy Town. You want to be, seeing a Hacker. You want to be hearing Fijian players who are going to go out and belt people, sing the most glorious hymn before they do it. We don't see this, and when it happens, it sends shivers down your spine. That's what makes it special. I think when you then add into the fact that you've got nations like Lebanon and Jamaica in the men's, I mean, Lebanon is an astonishing story when you think about what is happening in that country at the moment and has done, for too long. And admittedly, the vast majority of the players that will play for Lebanon will be heritage-based players from Australia. You talk to them about what it means. You talk to Michael Checker, who is coming over to coach the Lebanese team, whose family emigrated in a hurry from Lebanon to set up a life in Australia. He could not be more passionate than any coach we're going to meet. His team may not win a game, but the one thing he will imbue to any media that ask him the question, to any fans that are watching the output, is what it means to him and these players to don that shirt. And if we can get that across, which I think is something that we do really well in Rugby League, that essence of community, it'll be a success.
So if we can get Alan Jones in to bang out some hymns in Welsh before
Just touching on what Phil said though, I mean, Rugby Union's taken a look at what's happened with the heritage rules in the Pacific in Rugby League and copied it. Essentially they've changed their rules now. So Israel Folau, probably shouldn't mention, but he's playing for Tonga after playing for Wallabies and the numerous All Blacks.
Is that because they're the only country who let him play these days?
perhaps, but they've realised that this is something that they're missing out on. So, I mean, I think that's a nod to how well Rugby League has handled this particular situation with heritage. People will say, oh, you know, grandparent rule, etc., but literally every sport does it, and it is, you know, something we can use quite well.
I'd love to be able to play for a different
heritage.
The game that I can't get past at this World Cup is England versus Brazil in the women's competition, opening up things at Headingley. I mean, you must have seen thousands of games at Headingley involving hundreds of teams. Did you ever think you'd see the Brazilian women's national rugby?
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to ask me why I was most looking forward to it, because England against Brazil out of the league, it's just... I mean, you couldn't have imagined it a few years ago. As I say, there's going to be a big crowd, we hope. I'm not sure it will be much of a contest, but it will be an occasion. And I think that everybody that goes to it is going to be impressed by the event and by certainly the standard of the English team. Hopefully Brazil will give a good account of themselves. It's just going to be one of those I was there type moments, I think, and that's the thing I'm really looking forward to.
Are you going to Brazil this year, Jodie?
Next year. Next year.
So come the 2025 World Cup, Brazil could be one of the big contenders in the wheelchair competition.
Potentially, I think the whole idea between the partnership with Wales Rugby League and Brazil is that it's to help them develop a wheelchair side and have a national side. So, you know, might not be the next World Cup, but even the World Cup after that, you know, it takes a long time to establish a nation in a competition such as the World Cup. So it's a start, and you know, we might find more nations come out and say, actually, you know, whether it's England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, can one of the home nations partner with us and help us develop the sport as well? And you know, we've got USA in my group pool this year. Up until teams were announced, did not even know USA were planning to put, you know, their hat in the ring. So it just shows where that development's going, and it's not just, you know, wheelchair, it is across all forms of rugby league, and it can only go to a positive place.
Jamaica would be mentioned. Based in Leeds, big Jamaican community here. We saw when they played Wales at Bellevue a few years ago, the Carnival band there. We saw that at the England Knights game a couple of years. I mean, that feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it, at Headingley? But there's going to be some great opportunities for people to get involved and just enjoy a night of the rugby league, regardless of what the game's going to go like.
I think Jamaica will probably be everybody's second favourite team. I think they're going to be entertaining. Obviously, they're going to find it tough. It's basically a team made up of players from the second and third divisions in this country, but they're going to be good value. They played Scotland was it Scotland? At Featherstone last year, got a draw. There was a samba band there playing afterwards with all the players.
Samba band in Featherstone.
Taking part. It was fantastic, and I think people will really get behind Jamaica. And you know, Greece are a good story as well. That's something a bit new for rugby league. I think there's just so many teams to take an interest in this time. I mean, you don't need to know anything about the players or anything like that. Just pick a team and support them. I think it'll be great.
Can I just say, the big thing about the Caribbean, certainly Jamaica for me, there's a big Caribbean community. Obviously, part of my heritage is from St Kitts, and there's a big St Kitts community in Leeds. But there's so much talent as well in that community. It's unbelievable. So, you know, there's school kids in Chapeltown and those areas that are winning athletics competitions every year, and athletically are world class, but never get exposed to the game of rugby league, so don't see it. There's no reason to see it. And you know, how many Jason Robinsons are there up there, how many Ellery Handlers and so many other great players that are from that heritage that we can attract through games like that at Headingley. And it was brilliant. You know, the England Knights won in 2019. We had to tell them all, you can't bring big bottles of rum into the ground like that, you know, curry goat and all sorts, Dutch pot. But for me, I think that it's a talent ID opportunity as well, you know, to really get a demographic. Love Mikael Ledsky at the minute, you know, but he's a different accent from a different sort of nation as well, of traditionally big, strong human beings, and they're up here shine in this World Cup. He'll have to shine now. He's got weight off his shoulders now that Walmsley doesn't like his fit. But yeah, lots of little talent, idea and attractive opportunities as well with it.
We've got 10 minutes left. We'll ask some questions in a minute. We'll go down the line. I'm not going to ask who's going to win, because that's just flippant. Who are you looking forward to most seeing in action player-wise in the World Cup, John? Or who should the people be looking out for?
Jesus, that's a hard question.
That's why I'm sat here asking them.
Let me think about it. Phil? There's a hospital passport.
I think it will be fantastic to see somebody like Cameron Monster live. I mean, he is arguably tipped as the best player in the NRL at the moment. His team have been knocked out early in the playoffs. I think that makes him even more dangerous because he's going to have a significant amount of rest. Brandon Smith for New Zealand is going to be fantastic. But I think sort of John hinted at it with the Samoans, that they could be anything in the men's game at the moment. And if they get that cultural side right, that apparently has been missing a little bit, they've always had talented players, but they've never really bought into the idea of what Samoa is and what it can do outside of just being a rugby player. The elements that make you proud to be Samoan, and I think that has been missing. But is it Frank Pritchard that they've got involved as their cultural officer?
The Johns brothers getting involved, is that whole thing a bit now?
But if they can get that right, then seeing the likes of Jerome Luai, who we've seen for Penrith again on his day, one of the greatest players of this current generation, why wouldn't we want to go and see him? And that's just the men's game. I mean, clearly I'd plan on to see Jodie play for Wales.
JBW, because we suddenly Bill Williams is busy. Who's either on your team or opposed? I guess you don't know anything about the Americans. No one knows anything about them.
No, I don't know anything about the USA team other than I know some of the players that they've got are ex-military veterans, so they're veterans, same as what a lot of our players in the wheelchair game in this country are. But they are the unknown. France is going to be my first group game.
You love the French, don't you?
Oh, I tolerate them. I think they hate me. I've been for that, for example, I've been mentioning to some of my Welsh teammates that watch, the Leeds and Catalan Dragons game, just for some pointers on some of the certain players from the French team that we will be playing. I will happily admit there's one French player I am not looking forward to playing, and that's because he's probably about 6 foot sat in his chair. And every time I've competed against him in the past 12 years, he has gone in and not given any allowances for everyone always seems to think I get allowances made because I'm female in a mixed team. I do not. But I wouldn't expect it either. So Danny is definitely one of those players that I know the moment I have the ball and he's close to me, he's going to send me flying off the pitch. And it's fine. I sit very short, so I'm going to go up to him, try and tackle him and just be like this, trying to reach. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting group in my group. Same with England. They've got the likes of Australia, who I think are in the top 5 in the world. I know the top 3, which is France, England, Wales. Then I can't remember who's 4th and 5th. Somewhere in there. But that's based on the amount of international games that have been played, and obviously we had a 2-year period where we weren't playing. I'm definitely will be interested to watch the England lot against Australia, just because of the development that's happened on both sides of things. And yeah, I'm a little bit biased in some ways, definitely looking forward to watching some of, the men's and women's from Leeds represent each country. I've got favourites, but I'm not going to say that. Because you're just waiting for, obviously, selections to be announced for each team. But yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting time.
So Phil, you let the side down. You didn't say you were looking forward to seeing Daniel Anderson playing. She only scored the other week as well. Yeah.
I am.
So obviously, what we're saying is we should buy tickets to go see Wales versus France.
I mean, I think so. If you want to see some
violence,
big hits, yeah, it is. And then obviously, I think, like, none of us hold back, but because the French play by a variation of the rules that we play in the UK, they're never quite sure as to what they can get away with.
Well, in fairness, the Women's Super League here plays completely different rules to the NRLW.
Yeah, so it's definitely, like, I think one game that I'm, you know, both looking forward to and dreading at the same time is that France game. USA, I'm down, you know. Scotland, I get to annoy Scotland's head coach, who is my ex-England coach. And every time I score, I go like this. So, yeah, definitely looking forward to it and counting down. There's actually a countdown in my house now, probably so that everyone can get rid of me for a few weeks.
Oh, sure. Peter, who are you looking forward to see?
I think it's very difficult individually. I'm just looking forward to seeing Australia play because they don't normally
They don't play, yeah.
So if they actually turn up, I'll be looking forward to seeing them. And as I say, I think Jamaica are going to be great fun. I think Brazil are a really good story as well. I'm just looking forward to the whole tournament. The fact is, we're going to get to visit new grounds, different places. I think there's a semi-final.
The Emirates.
Yes. The Emirates. I think that would be excellent. I don't know if anyone went to the Challenge Cup final at Spurs, but that was a real good occasion. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Arsenal Stadium's like. And I think the final, the double-header final at Old Trafford, which will be packed, will be just a real special occasion. One of those, events that you just don't want to miss. I think the whole tournament's going to be good.
Review of the press room coming in the post-tournament edition of Forty20 magazine.
Christmas special. What sandwiches did we get?
As an ex-player, what do you look forward to when you come to a tournament like this? Because are you wanting to be out there? Are you wanting to just sit down and enjoy it?
I'd always play one little bit. Funny enough, I'd give everything in my 22-year career, and I loved it. But yeah, different world now. I'm looking forward to seeing Courtney Winfield. Oh, she's ready to play for England, isn't she? Super Aussie accent. Craig Richards. I think she'll bring a lot to that team as well. I don't think we've seen best of her this year, but I think that's a game where she's going to really come out of the show and play well. Tara Jane Stanley, I think she's up for Woman of Steel. And listening to Craig Richards, you're not sure he's going to play at fullback as well. He's quite cryptic with that. So I'm looking forward to seeing women's game. I think they'll throw everything in the kitchen sink at that World Cup. And the men's, my old teammate Callum Watkins, remember that ankle tap? I was there at Old Land Park and I watched it. No! And of all the people in the world you'd want the ball to be in his hands, it'd be Callum Watkins. Just got in by a stud length. But I think he's been unbelievable this year in back row. And he covers the multitude now. I think he's still obviously got the attributes of a great centre and a back rower. And I'd also, a big call this, John Wilkin was banging on about Andy Ackers at 9. I think he's been sensational this year. I know Brodie Croft has been unbelievable for Salford, but when you take a backward step and see who's making the plays 2 or 3 plays before, that presents the opportunity for Brodie Croft. I think it's Ackers is one of the smartest players reviewing his games in the league at the minute. And I know Sean Wayne likes his fortuitous 9s in likes of Mickey Mack and
he's Irish.
Yeah. No, but I'm just going off the mid-season international. But I think Andy Ackers, I'd like to see him get a goal as well.
If he's picking on form,
yeah,
that's what they say. All international coaches in whatever sport, they say they're going to pick on form. I thought for a moment you were going to say pick John Wilkin. I thought that's a bit. I know things are desperate, but there's 1 minute and 35 seconds on the clock. But, any questions? I'll throw it open as if I'm Fiona Bruce. No, that's good then, isn't it?
Comes asleep.
Everyone's asleep.
There's people on the internet, they can't see there's nobody.
I was stunned by your wisdom and your wise words.
Talking to Jodie.
We'll go with that. Thank you for coming. It's much appreciated. So much better than the audience was when we were in Featherstone and Castle away. John, thank you. Good luck to Australia on this film. Magazine's out this week, isn't it?
Yeah, in shops on Friday. Subscribers possibly get it Thursday. Full of World Cup related stuff and all the usual comments.
How much of my column did I write this month?
Couldn't possibly tell you.
So I go for
There's a great piece by Pete on what's happened at Wakefield.
which is now
Completely out of date. 24 hours after a rotate. Yeah, marvellous.
Jodie, good luck with the World Cup for Wales. You know, if England don't win, let's hope that you're singing with Alan Jones in the change rooms. No, don't. Peter, enjoy the match review panel next week. Hopefully Leeds have some involvement, well, not involvement, but obviously some future involvement. And the same for you, Jeremy. Obviously, the best of luck with Leeds for the playoffs. And I'm not crossing my fingers this time. People think I don't like Leeds. But, you know, it's better than Wigan winning.
Got last Yorkshire team in now, as Adrian Morley pointed out last week. So, yeah, all the best.
And thank you for coming, and thanks for watching, and enjoy the World Cup. I think that's all we end.